The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the royal palace as seven-year-old princess walked quietly through the grand corridors. Her small hands clutched a worn teddy bear, and her eyes darted nervously toward the tall windows that overlooked the palace gardens. Something felt different today. The usual cheerful chatter of the palace staff had been replaced by hushed whispers and worried glances. Princess had been living in the palace her entire life, surrounded by luxury and protection. Her father, King Edward, ruled the small European kingdom with wisdom and kindness. Her mother, Queen Isabella, had passed away when was only 4 years old, leaving the young princess to be raised by a team of devoted nannies and tutors under her father's watchful eye. The palace had always been her safe haven, filled with secret passages she had discovered during her endless games of hide-and-seek. She knew every corner, every hidden door, and every servant by name. But today, even her favorite places felt strange and unwelcoming. As she made her way toward the breakfast room, Princess noticed something unusual. There were more guards than normal stationed throughout the palace. Their faces were stern, and they whispered urgently into small communication devices. The princess had never seen so many serious-looking men in dark uniforms walking through her home. When she entered the breakfast room, her father was not there waiting for her as he did every morning. Instead, she found Mrs., her head nanny, packing nervously by the large dining table. The older woman's usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and her hands shook as she poured tea into delicate china cups. "Where is Papa?" Princess asked, setting her teddy bear on the silk-cushioned chair beside her. Mrs. forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "His Majesty is in very important meetings today, dear. He asked me to tell you that he loves you very much and will see you later." The princess nodded, but something in the nanny's voice made her stomach feel tight with worry. She had heard that same tone before, on the day the doctors had told her that Mama would not be coming home from the hospital. After breakfast, Princess was told she needed to stay in the east wing of the palace for the day. This was unusual because she was normally allowed to roam freely throughout the entire building. Mrs. explained that there were important visitors coming, and it would be best if the princess played quietly in her rooms or the small library nearby. But Princess was curious by nature, just like her father had been as a child. She waited until Mrs. was busy organizing her afternoon lessons, then quietly slipped out of her room. She knew exactly where to go to see what was happening in other parts of the palace. There was a small balcony on the second floor that overlooked the main courtyard. Princess had discovered it months ago while exploring with her best friend, Thomas, the son of the palace gardener. From this hidden spot, she could see everything that happened in the courtyard without being noticed. As she crept toward her secret viewing place, she heard voices coming from her father's study. The heavy wooden door was slightly open, and she could hear men speaking in urgent, worried tones. She recognized her father's voice, but it sounded different than usual. Instead of his normal calm and confident manner, King Edward sounded frightened and angry. "They cannot be serious about these demands," her father was saying. "I will not negotiate with people who threaten innocent lives." Another voice, one she didn't recognize, replied sharply, "Your Majesty, with respect, you may not have a choice. They have made their intentions very clear. If their demands are not met by sunset today, they will take action." Princess pressed herself against the wall beside the door, trying to understand what the men were discussing. She had heard the word demands before, usually when grown-ups were talking about politics or business matters that she didn't understand. But something about the way these men were speaking made her feel scared. "What kind of action?" her father asked, and Princess could hear the fear in his voice. "They have indicated they will target the palace directly," the unfamiliar voice answered. "Our intelligence suggests they have been planning this for months. The security breach we discovered last week was likely connected to their operation." Princess' heart began to beat faster. She didn't understand all the words, but she knew that someone was planning to hurt her father or maybe even her. She thought about her mother, who had been taken away by sickness, and the idea that something might happen to her father made her feel sick to her stomach. Quietly, she continued toward her secret balcony, hoping to see what was happening in the courtyard. As she climbed the narrow stairs that led to the hidden viewing spot, she could hear helicopters in the distance. The sound was getting louder, which meant they were coming toward the palace. When she reached the small balcony, Princess carefully peeked over the stone railing. What she saw in the courtyard below made her gasp and quickly duck back down. There were dozens of men in black uniforms running across the courtyard. They carried large weapons and moved with purpose and urgency. Some were setting up barriers, while others were positioning themselves behind walls and vehicles. In the center of the courtyard stood a man she had never seen before. He was tall and wore a different uniform from the others. He seemed to be giving orders, pointing in different directions and speaking into a radio device. Even from her hiding place high above, Princess could tell that this man was in charge of whatever was happening. As she watched, more men in black uniforms entered the courtyard through the main gate. They moved quickly and quietly, like the special soldiers she had seen in movies. But this wasn't a movie. This was real, and it was happening in her home. Princess realized that the palace was being surrounded by these strange men. She thought about her father, somewhere in the building below, trying to deal with whatever threats had been made against them. She thought about Mrs. and the other staff members who had always taken care of her. Most of all, she thought about how scared and alone she felt. She knew she needed to do something to help, but she didn't know what. She was just a 7-year-old girl, and these were grown men with weapons and plans that she couldn't understand. But as she crouched on the small balcony, watching the activity below, an idea began to form in her mind. There was one person in the palace who might be able to help her understand what was happening and what she could do. His name was Captain James, and he had been her father's personal security guard for as long as she could remember. Captain was different from the other guards. He always smiled when he saw her, and sometimes he would tell her stories about his own daughter, who lived in another country with her mother. Captain had taught Princess some simple safety procedures when she was younger. He had shown her special signals she could use if she ever felt unsafe or needed help. At the time, it had seemed like a game, but now she wondered if those signals might actually be important. As she thought about Captain, Princess remembered that he was usually stationed near the main entrance during important security situations. If she could get his attention somehow, maybe he could help her understand what was happening and make sure her father was safe. But getting to the main entrance would mean leaving her hiding place and walking through parts of the palace where the strange men in black uniforms might see her. Mrs. had told her to stay in the East Wing, and Princess had never disobeyed such clear instructions before. She sat quietly on the small balcony for several minutes, listening to the sounds of activity below and trying to decide what to do. The helicopters were getting closer, and she could hear vehicles arriving outside the palace gates. Whatever was happening, it was getting bigger and more serious by the minute. Finally, Princess made her decision. She couldn't just sit and hide while her father and everyone she cared about might be in danger. She would try to find Captain and get his help. Maybe together they could figure out a way to keep everyone safe. As she prepared to leave her hiding place, Princess looked down at her teddy bear, which she had left back in the breakfast room. For the first time in her life, she would have to be brave without her favorite comfort object. She took a deep breath, straightened her small shoulders, and began to make her way carefully through the palace corridors toward what she hoped would be help and safety. Princess moved carefully through the palace corridors, staying close to the walls and listening for any sounds that might indicate danger. The familiar paintings and tapestries that usually brought her comfort now seemed to watch her with worried expressions. Every shadow looked like it might hide one of the strange men in black uniforms she had seen in the courtyard. As she made her way toward the main entrance, she could hear more activity throughout the building. Doors were closing with unusual force, and she could hear the quick footsteps of people moving urgently through distant hallways. The palace, which had always been a place of calm order, now felt chaotic and unpredictable. When she reached the grand staircase that led down to the main entrance hall, Princess crouched behind a large marble pillar and carefully looked down. The scene below was unlike anything she had ever witnessed in her home. The beautiful entrance hall, where visiting dignitaries usually gathered for formal ceremonies, had been transformed into what looked like a military command center. There were tables set up with computers and communication equipment. Men and women in various uniforms were speaking rapidly into headsets and studying maps spread across the surfaces. The elegant chandelier that had always sparkled during royal receptions now cast harsh light on the serious faces of people who seemed to be planning some kind of operation. Princess scanned the busy scene below, looking for Captain's familiar face. She had known him since she was very small, and his presence had always made her feel safe during formal events when the palace was filled with strangers. He was a tall man with kind eyes and graying hair, and he always wore his dress uniform with perfect pride. Finally, she spotted him near the main doors, speaking with two other guards she didn't recognize. Captain looked more serious than she had ever seen him. His usually relaxed posture was rigid and alert, and he kept glancing toward the windows as if watching for something outside. Princess knew she needed to get his attention, but she also realized that calling out to him would alert everyone else in the entrance hall to her presence. She remembered the special signals he had taught her during their safety lessons. One of them was designed specifically for situations when she needed help but couldn't speak loudly. The signal involved using a small mirror to reflect light in a specific pattern. Captain had given her a special compact mirror for this purpose, which she always kept in the pocket of her dress. The pattern was simple: 3 quick flashes, followed by 2 long ones, then 3 quick flashes again. He had told her it was based on an old emergency signal that people had used for many years. Princess carefully pulled the small mirror from her pocket and positioned herself so that the light from the chandelier would reflect off its surface. She had practiced this signal many times during their lessons, but never in a real emergency situation. Her hands trembled slightly as she angled the mirror toward Captain's position near the doors. She began the sequence: 3 quick flashes by moving the mirror rapidly to catch and release the light. Then 2 longer flashes, holding the reflection steady for a few seconds each time. Finally, 3 more quick flashes to complete the pattern. At first, Captain didn't notice. He was too focused on his conversation with the other guards. Princess repeated the signal, this time moving to a slightly different position to make sure the reflected light would be more visible from where he was standing. On her third attempt, Captain's eyes suddenly moved upward toward the staircase. For a moment, he looked confused, as if he wasn't sure what he had seen. Then his gaze found Princess crouched behind the marble pillar, and his expression immediately changed to one of shock and concern. Captain quickly excused himself from his conversation and began walking toward the staircase. He moved casually, as if he were simply checking something in the area, but Princess could see the urgency in his steps. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, he looked around to make sure no one was watching, then gestured for her to come down to him. Princess hesitated for a moment. Mrs. had told her to stay in the East Wing, and she had already broken that rule by coming this far. But Captain's familiar face and his gentle beckoning motion convinced her that she was doing the right thing. She stood up from behind the pillar and walked down the stairs as quietly as possible. Captain met her halfway and immediately guided her to a small alcove behind the staircase, where they would be hidden from the view of the people in the entrance hall. "Princess," he said in a low, urgent whisper, "what are you doing here? You should be with Mrs. in the East Wing where it's safe." "Captain," she whispered back, "I'm scared. There are strange men everywhere and Papa sounds frightened. I heard him talking to people about demands and threats. What's happening?" Captain's face showed a mixture of concern for her safety and admiration for her courage in seeking him out. He knelt down so that he was at her eye level, which he always did when he wanted to speak to her seriously. "Princess, there are some very bad people who want to hurt your father and take over the palace," he explained in simple terms. "We're here to protect you and the king, but the situation is very dangerous right now. You need to go back to the East Wing and stay with Mrs. until this is over." "But what if they hurt Papa?" Princess asked, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. "I don't want to lose him like I lost Mama." Captain's expression softened. He had been there during the difficult time when Queen Isabella had died, and he understood the princess's fear of losing her remaining parent. "Your father is the bravest and man I know," he said gently, "and he has the best protection possible. But the most important thing to him right now is knowing that you are safe. If he has to worry about where you are, it will be harder for him to handle this situation." Princess nodded, but she still looked worried and uncertain. She trusted Captain completely, but the idea of going back to her room and waiting while her father faced danger seemed impossible. "Captain," she said, "the signal you taught me worked, didn't it?" "Yes, it did," he replied with a small smile. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do, and I'm proud of you for remembering the training." "Are there other ways I could help?" she asked. "I know the palace better than anyone. I know all the secret passages and hiding places. Maybe that information could be useful." Captain paused, considering her words carefully. It was true that Princess knew the palace layout better than most of the security team. She had spent years exploring every corner of the building, and her knowledge of the hidden passages and secret rooms was remarkably detailed for someone her age. "That's very thoughtful of you, Princess," he said. "But the best way you can help right now is by staying safe and letting the grown-ups handle the dangerous work." Before Princess could respond, they both heard the sound of heavy footsteps approaching the alcove where they were hiding. Captain immediately positioned himself protectively in front of the princess and placed his hand on his weapon. A moment later, one of the guards Captain had been speaking with earlier appeared around the corner. His face was tense with urgency. "Captain," the guard said quickly, "we have a problem. The perimeter team has reported movement in the North Gardens. It looks like the intruders are trying to breach the palace through the service entrance near the kitchen area." Captain's jaw tightened. Princess could see that this news was very serious, though she didn't fully understand what it meant. "How many?" Captain asked. "At least 6, possibly more," the guard replied. "They're wearing tactical gear and appear to be well armed. The commander wants all available personnel to respond to the North Sector immediately." Princess listened to this exchange with growing alarm. The North Gardens were very close to the East Wing, where she was supposed to be staying with Mrs. If bad people were trying to get into the palace through that area, then the place she had been told was safe might not be safe at all. Captain seemed to realize the same thing. He looked down at Princess with a conflicted expression. He clearly wanted to respond to the security threat, but he also couldn't leave the princess unprotected in the middle of the chaos. "Princess," he said quickly, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. The situation has changed, and it's no longer safe for you to be in the East Wing. I'm going to take you to a special secure room that's designed exactly for emergencies like this." Princess nodded, trusting him completely. She had heard rumors about special safe rooms in the palace, but she had never seen one. "The room is hidden behind your father's study," Captain explained, as he guided her carefully through corridors she had never explored. "It's equipped with everything you might need, and it has special communication equipment that will let you talk to your father and me if necessary." As they walked quickly but quietly through the palace, Princess could hear the sounds of the security response intensifying around them. Radio communications crackled with urgent updates, and she could hear people moving rapidly through nearby hallways. When they reached the area behind her father's study, Captain pressed a sequence of hidden buttons concealed in the decorative molding around a bookshelf. To Princess' amazement, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a small but comfortable room she had never known existed. The room contained a bed, a small table with chairs, cabinets filled with supplies, and several pieces of electronic equipment that looked very sophisticated. There were even some books and toys, as if the room had been prepared specifically with her in mind. "This room is completely secure," Captain explained as he showed her how to operate the communication system. "No one can get in without knowing the special codes, and you'll be safe here no matter what happens in the rest of the palace." As Princess looked around the hidden room, she felt both amazed by its existence and frightened by the fact that such precautions had been necessary. She realized that her father and the security team had been preparing for dangerous situations long before today's crisis. Captain knelt down beside her one more time before leaving. "I want you to promise me that you'll stay in this room until either your father or I come to get you personally," he said. "No matter what you hear or what happens, do not open that door for anyone else." Princess promised, and Captain activated the security system before closing the hidden door. Suddenly, she was alone in the secret room, surrounded by silence while chaos continued throughout the rest of her home. Princess sat in the hidden room, surrounded by an eerie silence that felt completely different from the chaos she knew was happening throughout the rest of the palace. The walls were thick enough to muffle most sounds, but occasionally she could hear distant voices or the sound of footsteps running past in the corridors outside. The communication equipment Captain had shown her included a special monitor that displayed different areas of the palace through security cameras. Princess had never realized that cameras were watching so many places in her home. But now, she could see live images of hallways, rooms, and outdoor areas where security teams were positioned. She watched the screen with fascination and growing concern as she saw the serious faces of guards moving through familiar spaces. The library where she usually had her afternoon reading time was now occupied by men studying building plans. The garden where she played with Thomas was being patrolled by armed guards who scanned constantly for any signs of intruders. Most troubling of all, she could see her father's main study, where King Edward was meeting with several officials she didn't recognize. Her father looked tired and worried, and he kept running his hands through his hair the way he always did when he was trying to solve a difficult problem. Through the audio system, Princess could hear fragments of the conversation taking place in her father's study. The strangers were presenting him with documents and speaking in urgent tones about negotiations and deadlines. She still didn't understand all the details, but it was clear that her father was being forced to make very difficult decisions under extreme pressure. "Your Majesty," one of the officials was saying, "the demands they've made are completely unreasonable, but they've demonstrated that they have the capability to carry out their threats. We have confirmation that they've already infiltrated the outer perimeter and are continuing to advance toward the main building." Her father's voice sounded strained when he replied, "I will not give in to terrorism, regardless of the personal cost, but I also cannot allow innocent people to be hurt because of my decisions. What options do we have?" Another official spoke up. "The tactical team believes they can neutralize the threat, but the operation would be extremely risky. There's also the possibility that the intruders have additional resources we haven't identified yet." Princess listened to this conversation with a growing sense of responsibility. These people were trying to hurt her father and take over their kingdom, and all the grown-ups were struggling to find a solution that would keep everyone safe. As she continued watching the security monitors, she noticed something that made her heart race with excitement and fear. On one of the screens showing the North Gardens, she could see a group of men in dark clothing moving carefully between the trees and bushes. They were clearly trying to stay hidden, but the palace's security cameras had spotted them. What caught her attention was their location. The intruders were approaching the palace through an area she knew very well. There was a hidden entrance in that part of the gardens that led to one of her favorite secret passages. She had discovered it months ago while playing hide-and-seek with Thomas, but she had never told anyone about it because she was afraid the adults would forbid her from using it. The secret passage connected to a network of maintenance tunnels that ran throughout the palace. Princess had explored these tunnels extensively, and she knew they provided access to almost every room in the building, including her father's study, the main security office, and even the room where she was currently hiding. If the intruders found that hidden entrance, they would be able to move through the palace without being detected by most of the security measures. They could reach her father or other important areas before anyone realized what was happening. Princess stared at the monitor, watching the dark-clothed figures getting closer to the secret entrance she knew about. She realized that she might be the only person who could warn the security team about this specific vulnerability in the palace's defenses. But Captain had made her promise to stay in the safe room no matter what happened. He had been very clear that she should not open the door for anyone except him or her father. If she tried to leave to warn someone, she would be breaking her promise and potentially putting herself in danger. She looked at the communication equipment, wondering if she could use it to contact Captain directly. The system seemed complicated, with multiple screens and controls that she didn't fully understand. She was afraid that if she pressed the wrong buttons, she might accidentally shut down the equipment or alert the intruders to the location of her hiding place. As she wrestled with this dilemma, Princess continued watching the security monitors. The group of intruders had reached the area just outside the hidden entrance, and they appeared to be searching for a way into the palace. It would only be a matter of minutes before they discovered the concealed door that led to the secret passage system. On another monitor, she could see that security teams were positioned throughout the palace, but none of them were in the right location to intercept the intruders before they entered the building through the hidden route. The guards were watching the main entrances and the obvious approaches, but they didn't know about the secret passage that Princess had kept to herself. In her father's study, the urgent conversation continued. King Edward was being presented with an ultimatum that required him to make a decision within the next hour. The officials were explaining that if he refused the intruders' demands, they had threatened to use force to take control of the palace and potentially harm members of the royal family. Princess felt a cold fear settle in her stomach as she realized that the members of the royal family they were talking about included her. These bad people weren't just threatening her father's rule over the kingdom. They were threatening to hurt her personally if they didn't get what they wanted. The weight of this realization made her decision clear. She couldn't sit safely in the hidden room while her father faced impossible choices and dangerous people prepared to enter the palace through a route that only she knew about. Her knowledge of the secret passages might be the key to stopping the intruders before they could carry out their threats. Princess stood up from the chair where she had been watching the monitors and walked to the hidden door. She paused with her hand on the control panel that would open the entrance to the safe room. Once she left this protected space, she would be vulnerable to all the dangers that Captain had wanted to shield her from. But she also remembered something her father had told her many times when he was teaching her about leadership and responsibility. A true ruler, he had said, must sometimes take personal risks to protect the people who depend on them. Princess had always thought those words applied to some distant future when she might become queen. She had never imagined that she would need to apply that lesson as a 7-year-old child hiding in a secret room while her home was under attack. She activated the door mechanism and stepped out of the safe room into the corridor behind her father's study. The sounds of activity throughout the palace were much louder now, and she could hear radio communications and urgent conversations coming from multiple directions. Moving as quietly as possible, Princess began making her way through the palace corridors toward the area where she had last seen Captain. She knew she needed to reach him quickly and give him the information about the secret entrance before the intruders used it to gain access to the building. As she walked through the familiar hallways that now felt strange and dangerous, she practiced in her mind exactly what she would say to Captain. She would explain about the hidden entrance in the North Gardens, describe the location of the secret passages, and offer to help guide the security team to intercept the intruders. But when Princess reached the main entrance hall where she had last seen Captain, he was nowhere to be found. The area was still busy with security personnel, but they were all strangers to her. She realized that Captain must have been deployed to respond to the threat in the North Gardens, which meant he was probably very close to the area where the intruders were planning to enter the palace. Standing in the entrance hall, surrounded by serious-faced adults who were focused on their urgent work, Princess felt very small and uncertain. She knew she had important information that could help protect her father and stop the bad people, but she didn't know how to communicate that information to people who didn't know her or trust her the way Captain did. As she hesitated, trying to decide what to do next, she heard a commotion coming from the direction of the North Gardens. Voices were shouting, and she could hear what sounded like people running. The security personnel in the entrance hall immediately responded to the disturbance, speaking rapidly into their communication devices and moving toward the source of the commotion. Princess realized that the intruders had found the hidden entrance and were now inside the palace. The secret passage system that only she knew about was being used against her father and everyone she cared about. Time was running out, and she was the only person who could provide the information needed to stop them. Taking a deep breath to steady her nerves, Princess approached the nearest security officer and tugged gently on his uniform sleeve. The man looked down at her with surprise and immediate concern. "Princess," he said urgently, "you should not be here. Where is your protective detail?" "Please," Princess said as clearly and calmly as she could manage. "I have very important information about how the bad people are getting into the palace. I need to talk to Captain or someone in charge right away." The security officer stared down at Princess in complete shock. His training had prepared him for many different emergency scenarios, but none of them had included receiving critical intelligence from a 7-year-old member of the royal family who was supposed to be safely hidden in a secure location. "Princess, he began, clearly unsure of how to respond to her unexpected appearance and urgent claim. "Please listen to me," Princess interrupted, speaking with a maturity and determination that surprised even herself. "The men in black clothes found a secret entrance in the North Gardens. There are tunnels behind the walls that connect to everywhere in the palace. They can get to Papa's study or the security office without anyone seeing them." The officer's expression immediately changed from confusion to intense attention. Through his earpiece, he was receiving reports about intruders who had somehow disappeared after being spotted near the palace perimeter. The security teams were searching frantically, but the intruders seemed to have vanished completely. "How do you know about these tunnels?" the officer asked urgently. "I explore them all the time," Princess replied. "I know where all the hidden doors are and which passages connect to which rooms. The bad people are probably already inside the walls, moving toward the important places. The officer immediately activated his communication device. Command, this is Officer Davies. I have Princess with me, and she's providing intelligence about hidden passages that the intruders may be using to move through the building undetected. The response crackled through his earpiece. Davies, the princess should be in the secure location. How did she? Sir, Officer Davies interrupted. With respect, that's not the immediate concern. If her information is accurate, it could explain how the intruders vanished and help us predict their next moves. Princess could hear the distant voice through the officer's earpiece saying something about bringing her to the command center immediately. Officer Davies nodded and turned his attention back to her. Princess, I need you to come with me right now to speak with the people in charge of protecting the palace. Can you do that? Yes, Princess replied without hesitation. But we need to hurry if the bad people reach Papa before someone stops them. Officer Davies understood the urgency in her voice. He guided her quickly through corridors she had never seen before, past rooms filled with computer equipment and maps of the palace grounds. Other security personnel they passed, stopped, and stared in amazement at seeing the princess in the middle of their operational area, but Officer Davies kept moving toward their destination. They entered a large room that had been converted into a command center, with multiple screens showing different areas of the palace and surrounding grounds. At the center of the room stood a tall woman in a military uniform who was clearly in charge of the entire operation. Several other officials were gathered around tables covered with building plans and communication equipment. Commander, Officer Davies announced, Princess has information about hidden passages that may be critical to our current situation. Commander turned around and looked at Princess with a mixture of surprise and professional assessment. Like Officer Davies, she had never expected to receive intelligence from such a young source, but the gravity of the situation required her to consider all available information. Princess, Commander said, kneeling down to speak with her at eye level, I understand you know about secret passages in the palace that aren't shown on our building plans. Yes, Princess replied. There's a hidden door in the north gardens behind the big oak tree near the fountain. It leads to tunnels that go everywhere in the palace. I've been in them lots of times. Commander exchanged glances with her officers. The area Princess was describing matched exactly with the location where the intruders had last been seen before disappearing. Can you show us on these maps where the passages go? Commander asked, spreading detailed building plans across a nearby table. Princess studied the maps for a moment, then began pointing to various locations. This passage goes from the garden entrance to the kitchen area. This one connects to the library, and this one, she traced a line with her finger, goes directly behind Papa's study where he has his meetings. The implications of this information hit everyone in the command center immediately. If intruders had access to the passage system, they could reach King Edward's location without being detected by any of the security measures currently in place. How long would it take someone to travel through these passages from the garden entrance to the king's study? Commander asked. Princess thought for a moment. If you know where you're going and don't get lost, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. But if you don't know the way, you could get lost for hours because some of the passages connect to each other. Commander activated her communication system. All units, we have confirmed intelligence that intruders may be using hidden passage systems to move through the building. Immediately redeploy teams to cover the areas behind the king's study, the main security office, and other critical locations. As the security teams began repositioning throughout the palace, Princess had another important realization. Commander, she said urgently, there's something else. Some of the passages have special listening places where you can hear what people are saying in the rooms nearby. What do you mean? Commander asked. There are spots in the walls where the builders left small openings so air could flow through the building, Princess explained. From those places, you can hear conversations happening in the rooms on the other side of the wall. I used to listen to Papa's meetings sometimes when I was supposed to be napping. This revelation was even more alarming than the previous information. If the intruders could listen to the king's conversations, they would know about all the plans being made to stop them and protect the palace. Commander immediately contacted King Edward's security detail. Secure the king immediately and move him to an alternate location. Assume that his current position has been compromised. Through the communication system, they could hear the response from the king's protective detail. Understood. We're moving His Majesty to the secure conference room in the south wing. Princess's eyes widened with alarm. No, she said urgently. That room isn't safe either. There's a passage that goes right past it, and there's a listening place in the wall where you can hear everything. Commander looked at the 7-year-old princess with newfound respect and concern. Princess, is there anywhere in the palace that these passages don't go? Somewhere your father would be truly safe. Princess thought carefully about the question. She had explored most of the palace over the years, but there were some areas that had always been off-limits to her. The old tower, she said finally. It's very old and was built differently from the rest of the palace. I've never found any passages that go there. Commander consulted her building plans and located the tower Princess was referring to. It was a structure connected to the main palace by a single heavily reinforced corridor. That could work, she said to her team. It's easily defendable and isolated from the main building systems. As plans were made to relocate King Edward to the tower, Princess heard a sound that made her heart race with fear. Through the palace's communication system came the voice of one of the guards stationed near her father's study. Command, we have a problem. We can hear movement in the walls near the king's current location. It sounds like multiple individuals, and they're very close to his position. Commander's face went pale. Move the king now, she ordered. All available units converge on his location for immediate extraction. Princess realized that despite all her warnings and the information she had provided, the bad people were still very close to reaching her father. She thought about the layout of the passages near his study and remembered something important. Commander, she said urgently, there's a way to block the passages. Some of them have heavy doors that can be closed from the outside. If someone could get to the right places, they could trap the bad people in the tunnels. Where are these doors? Commander asked. Princess pointed to locations on the building plans. Here, here, and here, but you have to know exactly where to look because they're hidden behind fake walls and secret panels. Commander made a decision that went against all standard security protocols. Princess, I know this is asking a lot of you, but we need your help to save your father and stop these intruders. Would you be willing to guide a small team to these locations so we can secure the passages? Princess didn't hesitate. Yes, but we have to hurry. Within minutes, Princess found herself leading a team of highly trained security officers through corridors and passages she had played in countless times. But this was no longer a game. The safety of her father and the security of her kingdom depended on her knowledge of the palace's hidden spaces. As they moved quickly but quietly through the building, Princess felt a strange mixture of fear and pride. She was scared about what might happen if they didn't reach the passage doors in time, but she was also proud to be using her knowledge to help protect the people she loved. The first door they reached was behind a bookshelf in the library. Princess showed the officers how to activate the hidden mechanism, and they quickly secured the heavy barrier that would prevent anyone from using that section of the passage system. The second door was more challenging to reach, requiring them to crawl through a narrow service corridor that Princess had used many times but was barely large enough for the adult officers. When they reached it, they found evidence that intruders had recently passed through the area, including footprints in the dust and equipment left behind. As they approached the third and most critical door, which would block access to the passages near her father's study, Princess heard voices coming from within the walls. The intruders were very close, and they seemed to be arguing about which direction to go. They're lost, Princess whispered to the lead officer. The passages can be confusing if you don't know them well. The officer nodded and signaled for his team to prepare for possible confrontation. They reached the final door just as sounds of movement became very clear from the other side of the wall. Working as quietly as possible, they activated the closing mechanism and secured the passage. From behind the now sealed door, they could hear frustrated voices and the sounds of people realizing they had been trapped. Commander's voice crackled through their communication devices. Excellent work. The king has been successfully relocated to the tower, and we have confirmation that the immediate threat has been neutralized. Princess felt a wave of relief wash over her, followed immediately by exhaustion from the stress and activity of the day. The security officer who had been leading their team looked down at her with genuine admiration. "Princess," he said, "what you did today was incredibly brave and probably saved a lot of people, including your father. I hope you understand how important your actions were." As they made their way back through the palace to reunite Princess with her father, she reflected on everything that had happened. When she woke up that morning, she had been a normal 7-year-old girl playing with toys and attending lessons. Now, she felt like she understood something new about responsibility, courage, and the importance of using knowledge to help others. When they finally reached the old tower where King Edward was waiting, Princess ran into her father's arms and felt the safety and love she had been missing throughout the long, frightening day. Her father held her tightly and thanked her repeatedly for her bravery and quick thinking. Later, after the remaining intruders had been captured and the palace was secure again, Princess sat with her father in the tower's comfortable sitting room. Captain was there too, having returned safely from the day's operations. "I'm sorry I broke my promise to stay in the safe room," Princess said to Captain. Captain smiled and shook his head. "Princess, sometimes breaking the rules is the right thing to do when people's lives are at stake. What you did today showed real leadership and courage. Your mother would have been very proud of you." King Edward looked at his daughter with love and amazement. "Today you learned something very important about leadership," he said. "A true leader doesn't just stay safe and let others handle problems. A true leader uses whatever knowledge and abilities they have to protect their people, even when it's scary or difficult." Princess nodded, understanding that this day had changed something fundamental about how she saw herself and her role in the world. She was no longer just a little girl living in a palace. She was someone who could make important decisions and take meaningful action when people she loved were in danger. As evening fell over the palace and normal routines began to return, Princess knew that she would never forget the day she helped save her father and learned what it really meant to be brave. The secret passages that had once been her playground had become the key to protecting everything that mattered to her, and she had proven that even a 7-year-old could make a difference when courage and knowledge came together.